Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for today's session. It's the first session for today. It's actually the only session for today. We've got a great session planned for you, so expect awesomeness. Before, as always, we jump into the presentation itself. Can you just let me know that you can hear me loud and clear by just raising your hand or typing into the chat box, "I can hear you"? That will be great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. I can see that people from all around the world can hear us. Great. We're now at the halfway point of the pre-summit. How is everyone getting on? Let me see how we've been doing so far. I'd love to see your feedback in the chat box. Let me know if it's been valuable, has been worthwhile, as the investments of 30 minutes every so often been a good investment of time. And let me just quickly look for that. Okay, great, great. Okay, good. That's good to hear. Um, Thank you very much for that. We've got some amazing sessions coming up. We're really saving the best till last. We've put into the second half. We've tried to up the ante a little bit and take things to the next level. That's always what we do. And as we get towards the end of the pre-summit, we try to give you as much value as possible. There's been a lot of questions around, are recordings available of the sessions that you miss? They are made available, and they're made available in the members area for those people that buy a ticket. And the early bird pricing is going to rise in just 2 weeks' time. So the price actually rises from $297 to $697, just as a little warning. So it goes up $400. So please continue to evaluate whether you feel that the summit would be good value to yourselves, and enjoy the sessions. And for those of you who would like to access recordings, that's how you can. Right, so without further ado, let me, in fact, one last piece of housekeeping. As always, we love your feedback on Facebook. I know not all of you are on Facebook, so please feel free to put your feedback in the chat box instead. But if you can jump on the Facebook wall, which is facebook.com/w or /WBECS, that would be fantastic. We love your feedback, any questions, comments, challenges. We even take constructive criticism on the Facebook wall, or you can just email me directly. We're here to make your experience amazing. The plan of the summit is simply to have a profound impact on the success of business and executive coaches the world over. That is our mission. So if we can help you in any way, then just let us know. And we're going to do our very best throughout these pre-summit sessions. And then obviously through the main event, which is the summit, which is this times 4, we're going to hopefully blow you away and really have a great impact on your success as a coach. Anyhow, without further ado, I would like to introduce my very good friend, Miles Downey. Miles is a thought leader and entrepreneur in the world of performance, learning, and coaching. He is the author of Effective Coaching, which has had in excess of 30,000 copies sold and is considered a seminal text on coaching. He is the co-creator of the eCoach system, the world's first automated coaching system. There is no coach. He was the founder of the School of Coaching in the UK, which was established in 1996, and the first proper school of coaching. He was also part of the team that established the Alexander Corporation in 1987, which was acknowledged by the Economist Intelligence Unit as the leading provider of executive coaching in Europe in 1993 and also in 1995. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to my very good friend, Miles Downey. Over to you, Miles.
Ben, thank you. All those nice words that Ben said, I wrote them all myself, and most of them are true. So it tells you that I've been around here a bit. I was thinking today, the first time I had an executive coaching client was in Dublin, Ireland in 1985. He was also the first person who fired me as a coach, because after the third session he'd achieved his, he was an insurance salesman with a small business in Dublin. After the third session he'd achieved his annual goals. So it was a celebratory firing. He didn't need any more help. This piece may be maybe a little bit different from some of the other presentations you'll hear, in that it's not entirely positive in tone. Given that that first coaching intervention was in 1984, that's a big number of years ago. I can't quite do the maths. And I've seen an industry grow from nothing, pretty much, to this extraordinary summit that Ben and his team have put together with thousands of people engaging. So a massive shift over those years. So this presentation is kind of has that sense of looking at what's happening and a little bit of perspective, and some of those things, some of the things that are emerging, some of the changes are at one level concerning if we don't do something about them, but equally they do also suggest a direction for the future. I notice that many people in the world of coaching tend to be in second and even third careers, and that means that we are a little bit more aged than some other people in the world of work, and that can also come hand in hand with an unwillingness or a difficulty in changing habit and perspective. But we're at a moment, I think, where if we want to continue to be successful as coaches, and if we want the industry to be all it can be, then there's a required reinvention, I think. So some of this is intended to be provocative, a bit of a thought piece, but it's intended also to be deeply practical. So at the end of it, I'm beginning to give a direction that you might choose to explore for yourself. It's in 30 minutes. We can't go into tools and techniques and approaches in the way that perhaps that would be most useful. But let me just say that there's a later on in this series at the main summit, I'll be kind of treading over some of this ground again in order to provide context, but then going into more practical material about how-to and approaches and techniques. So just trying to set the scene there for where we're headed. So let me take you to the next bit to say a little bit about where I intend taking you, and let's hope I can take you there. So current shifts, the context. So there are things happening widely and broadly that are that influence the world of coaching, and I will touch briefly on some of the bigger shifts there. And that will then take me into some observations about what's happening in the world of coaching and how that's becoming institutionalized and what the consequences of that are. And then following that, this maybe some of you newer to the game may not quite see, but there's particularly amongst senior users as opposed to buyers of coaching. In large corporate, they will tend to be different people, that there's a loss of credibility, and I'll say a little bit more about how I know that, but what I believe might be behind it. But that then, so we get a bit more hopeful then, and what that seems to me to do is to present us with an opportunity. I think that there is something about the way people behave and think and their attitudes in the 21st century that's different from the 20th century that makes coaching an extraordinary fit if we wake up to it. And some of that opportunity then reflects on you as a coach and what you might and how you might be, I think is the expression, to avail of those opportunities. So that's kind of, in the short time that we have, that's where I'm headed. There will, of course, be a time for some questions at the end. So, and I think that's right, because I'm making some assertions here that ought to be challenged. So the context broadly, we're kind of at an interesting time, 20th century moving to the 21st century. We're coming to the end, you could argue, of a command and control style of management that kind of has been present for 1,000 or so years that came out of the first time we saw larger institutions having to corral their membership, church, army come to mind, and the paradigm was one of command and control. I heard somebody the other day say, come up with these words. He said that society was like a pile of logs. Those at the top require stability, and having laughed appropriately, then kind of the horror of that lands fully. And I think that is one of the things that's changing, is that those people, those logs at the bottom, are beginning to wriggle restlessly. That was almost alliteration, not quite. Wriggle restlessly. And that has consequences. So I think there is a change as we move into this century. And I think part of that change, and this is where coaching has a place, is that we're struggling to find out what's next. And clearly, because we don't quite know, the business schools haven't kind of developed the case studies. So where do you go to find the answer? And part of where you go to find the answer is to look inside, to look to your own resources, to trust yourself, to create something new. So that's a place where that's part of this exploration. Another thing to think about in that move from 20th to 21st century is that as manufacturing kind of hotted up with our good friend Henry Ford, there was a massive drive for efficiency, and Henry Ford kind of exemplifies that with his production line. But then you go to, that becomes, after a while, people start looking at that more scientifically. You get into total quality, you get into business process re-engineering, and you get into Six Sigma, where people are looking at infinitesimal increases of efficiency. And there are two problems with that. One of which is it leads to compliance, and we're discovering that in not just in organizational culture, because we're discovering it in education. If you listen to Sir Ken Robinson, he'll talk about how the way that education has gone, the standardization, the testing has led to a model of compliance. You learn what you're told to learn, which of course is no longer learning. It's I don't know what it is, but it's very sterile. So the danger with that is the compliance, because something that, it's not that there's anything wrong with a production line, or indeed with Six Sigma. It's that they were designed and derived from processes where we're dealing with animate things, inanimate things at least, not human beings. And when you apply those things to human beings, what you do is you squash the vitality, the very core of being a human being. So I guess, and this is where coaching comes back in, is that what next? Well, I'm not going to entirely pretend to know, but what I do know is we've got massive problems with engagement across, particularly the Western world and the world in work. Massive problems. It's not so much that we have engagement, we have disengagement. Performance is an issue. What happens beyond being told? And that's something to explore, and a chronic lack of innovation, a dearth of imagination. So those are some of the things contextually that I think are around us. And as I've kind of intimated, many people at the top of organizations actually don't know what to do about that. Then we've got the wonderful Generation Z, those people that grew up with the technologies that are in front of us today, who simply, who don't quite understand the notion of compliance, because if they want to find something out, they simply go on the internet and find it, or they ask a friend. So when they go into an organization and find that you're supposed to do things in a certain manner and by rote, you've lost them immediately. They're also looking for work that is more meaningful and ethical. So that presents a whole raft of both opportunities and problems. And again, we really haven't got a clear idea about how to to manage people like that, to create meaningful relationships within an organization that's designed to produce stuff, and yet have those people be productive and creative. Then this is a statement of the obvious, but technology has landed. I've been working on as Ben kindly said in his introduction, on an e-coaching system where there literally is no coach. And what's been interesting in that is to see how far the leaders in distance and social learning have gone with what they can do, and how far behind the curve coaching is. And so there's a problem there, because the people we would seek to coach, those people now entering into leadership positions in organizations, are familiar with that technology. Many of us are not. There's a catch-up to be done there. And then there's a kind of slight shift and transition to my point here, which is about how organizations have responded. So some organizations have responded by becoming more flexible. That usually starts with organizing around customers and clients. You think of Whole Foods in the States, where the whole objective of that business, of course, is to sell healthy food. But in order to do that, organizing around the client means that you actually teach people how to cook healthy food. So you go into one of their places in the States, and you might end up sitting in a cookery class. And there's the beginnings then of people beginning to organize around staff. I was in the office of a big IT company the other day, and they have the obligatory pool table. And what was interesting was to watch the guys come and play a bit of pool, have a conversation about what they were doing, and then this was at the end of the day, kind of 6, 7 o'clock, and then some of them left to go home and go to the gym, and many others, having had their conversation around the pool table, thought, okay, well, I better, having had an insider solution, went back and started doing some more work. So there's the emergence of those flexible structures. But the larger organizations are digging their heels in. They're simply doing more of what they used to do and doing it harder, more command and control, and that's kind of dangerous. So that's a kind of broader context. In the world of coaching, we've got commoditization. What do I mean by that? I mean that we've got organizations that are making statements about what their coaching offering is. So you're at grade level 3 in this organization. That means you're allowed to have 4 coaching sessions, and we always do Myers-Briggs. Why? And then the other part of commoditization is that you get you get a homogenized group of coaches, because they've created a coaches bench where they've selected people for that organization, and you tend to get the same kinds of people pretty much having all bought their clothes in exactly the same store. And you hear their conversation, and it's predictable, and you can see that no creativity or innovation is going to flow from that. Forgive the slightly damning tone of voice, it's more fun than anything else. Learning and development. We've completely lost it with coaching. Coaching is primarily about performance. Please don't forget that. If you went to, we had the wonderful Olympics here in London last summer. If you went to any coach and you told them that coaching was about learning and development, they'd look at you as if you had 3 eyes, because their job is to help people win gold medals. Coaching has become predominantly about learning and development, not about performance. And I asked a major player in the UK a few years ago why he, what was that about? And he said, well, it's very simple. We're afraid to pin our colors to the performance mast, which is not a professional or ethical place to end up. So you can challenge that point of view. Please do. There you go. Here's another one. Poor buying. When I started in coaching, my clients were the chief executives and the HR directors. Now I'm speaking to a 30-year-old in the training and development department of a large organization who knows very little about coaching, who has no concept of what life is like for a senior person in that organization, and they're trying to pair off a coach with a senior person in that business, and their singular metric by which they'll be successful held to be successful is that they've reduced the cost. So bad news, fees are coming down. And all of this adds up to a kind of an institutionalization of coaching, and some of our larger organizations, ICF, EMCC, and I appreciate this is a difficult job, but there's a problem that for an organization of that scale, to have a voice, an organization has to have a membership. That means numbers. The problem there is that inclusivity, having large numbers, and quality are very, very uneasy bedfellows. Exclusivity and quality go much better together. So we've got a problem, and part of the problem is that we actually don't get into what coaching is actually about. So we permit all kinds of crazy stuff to go on under the guise of coaching, from really good professional stuff to people with religious backgrounds, people who are gurus, people with meditation, all of those things. So the organizations end up doing things like making statements about standards and ethics, which useful, but most professionals should be able to work those things out for themselves, and not actually talking about how you make a difference as a coach. So we're losing credibility. Senior executives are wondering what the value is. I've been talking to one or two people recently who've had coaching over the years, and when they first got promoted and were told their salary had increased and they got a new car and they got an executive coach, they thought that was wonderful. And now those people have had probably maybe one or two coaches over the years, and they're not really sure, that they're baffled because the people who showed up in front of them were so different and did different things, and they're really not sure about what value they got. Part of that is that there's no commonly held definition. I've just said that point about end users not really knowing what they're getting. There's the quality of coaching, and I'll say a little bit more about this, is really not what it needs to be. I was looking at a debate on a LinkedIn site the other day, and they were talking about how you needed to get the coachee, the player, to do the thinking. And a number of people responded saying, yes, I've tried that, but it doesn't make any difference. The issue there was not that they have tried it. They simply didn't have the skill to do it, because nobody had said that that's a fundamental part of coaching, the ability to get the other person to do the thinking. So then you get into a polarized debate about non-directive or directive coaching, which is really, really not very helpful, because clearly you need both. Again, I can imagine having a few interesting conversations about that. Within another part of losing credibility is the industry of coaching has decided that you have one session for an hour a month. Pretty much, that's the kind of the average way it goes. Why? I've started working with a new CEO a few weeks ago, and we agreed that there was work to be done. There was some sense of what that was about, and he was in a very flexible, very fluid situation. So he had we couldn't get to a formula for our program together. So what we've done is kind of, I'm available for a certain amount of time on an informal basis, and we've identified 3 conversations that he has to have in the next month, and we've put time in the diary to have those conversations. That's what he needs now. Next month he might need something different. So I think that's also, so in my past I've shown up at a chief executive's or a senior person's desk to do the coaching, and it's the wrong time for them. They've got other things on their mind. So we didn't have good coaching sessions. All of that, here's a bit more of a challenge. We became the instruments of compliance. That as the people who are the people to whom we are selling, we respond to the client's needs, and those needs are not the end users. And so the numbers of times in which you end up coaching people to a leadership model or competencies or whatever else that it is, that are, competencies are essentially a prison. They just deliver kind of competence. They don't deliver excellence. So we've kind of ended up playing the corporate game when originally we were the raiders. So the opportunity is something about going, I'm starting to speed up because I noticed the time. It's about going forward to the past, if you forgive me for that. When in the early days around coaching, what we were committed to was the flowering of the individual, self-expression, autonomy, growth, not helping people fit in a corporate box. So I think that we need to remember that essentially what we are about as coaches is about liberating that individual. You then work out afterwards how that liberated individual fits within a particular organization or go somewhere else. Implication for organizations, you need to change the way in which you manage people. That's a slightly different story. It's about performance. That learning and development, of course, is utterly vital. And all the evidence around excellence says that those people who demonstrate genius are really good at learning, really, really good at learning. They self-examine with a rigor that is beyond most people. But it's in service of learning, of performance, excuse me. And I think we need to remember that. I think the opportunity is also about helping leaders respond to the shifts that I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, diatribe. The old rules aren't working in terms of how you corral people, how you bring them together, how you inspire, how you engage. That was an earlier part of this. That needs to be reinvented, and it needs to be reinvented in a very personal way for each person who's leading an organization or part of an organization. That is a massive opportunity for people who have coaching skills, the space where there are no known answers. It's about technology. There are technologies out there now that are hugely helpful to coaching. If you look, there are one or two LinkedIn groups, for instance, and various other conversation groups on technology. And what they're talking about is how you use Skype or your mobile phone. That's not technology. That's last generation technology. There are all kinds of systems out there that can help us be much more effective in coaching. I came across somebody recently who has a system that allows you to hold, how about this, 7-minute conversations with clients at the beginning of a day so that they're completely focused for the day. And allows him to send inspiring quotes, relevant models and data, allows him to record the conversation so that he can send the recording back. So there's huge things happening in the world of technology that we need to embrace, because the people that we are coaching have already embraced the technology. And the same point, really, that this is about being user-friendly. It's about thinking it not from what's convenient or economical for us to do, but actually, I don't know anybody who's gone into a large user base of coaching and said, what would really work for you? And that's an interesting exercise, I would suggest. So I'm hoping there that I'm beginning to point to some directions where you might put your thinking and your intelligence at work. And then my last slide is actually there's the reinvention of not just the industry but ourselves in this. And I'm 53. In 2 years' time, I'll be 55. That's about the only maths I can do. And I used to be quite a good tennis player. So I'm building up. 55 is a break in the veterans, 55 and older, and I'm going back to play competitive tennis. You heard it here first. At the age of at the youthful age of 55. So I've already hooked up with my coach. It took me a long time to find somebody who was who I could work with, or who was willing to work with me. And here's the thing that he asked me in our second lesson. He said to me, Miles, what's your identity as a tennis player? Boy, did we have an interesting conversation. In a sense, he was asking about how I wanted to play, and what did Miles being expressed as a tennis player look like. So I've run some retreats recently for coaches, and one of the really interesting things is to help people find out, so who fundamentally are you as a coach, and what does that look like? What's your craft? And once you've identified your craft, then you can start getting better at it. Because in my world, prose practice. As one of the good fortunes of my career was that in the School of Coaching, I had to demonstrate coaching live to large numbers of people. So I've probably done almost as much coaching in front of audiences as I've done kind of real executive coaching. So the amount of feedback that you get when doing that, the scrutiny that you put on your own practice is extraordinary. As a professional tennis player, you hit thousands more balls in practice than you do in the white heat of battle. And it's the thousands of balls in practice that make you good in the white heat of battle. I don't know any professional coaches who practice their skills. And that's shocking. But it's also the opportunity. And frankly, the coaching profession deserves that we do that and be the best we can be. And finally, and this is obvious, but it's always worth re-examining, which is the kind of the sum total of the points above is what's your niche. So the people that I know that are in this slightly collapsing world of coaching that are flourishing and being successful are being much clearer about their niche. They're not just putting themselves out in the world and saying, I'm a coach, buy me. They're saying, I'm a coach for people who lead large sales teams. Or they've got another niche. My own personal niche bears a title called Meeting the Challenge. So I'm only working with people right now who are typically in leadership positions, but not exclusively, who've got major projects to deliver that are real challenges and that are demanding the best of them. So I'm hoping that there are sufficient directions for you to follow through on in that, and some thoughts. I'm hoping that it's been provocative but not offensive. There's a summit presentation on that date, 26th of June, and it's about going more into that reinvention and what you might actually do and how you might have greater impact with your clients. And I lost the last page for whatever reason. Too much excitement. So I'll put you back onto the last page. As I say, Ben, I have reached the end of.
Hello,
it
Miles.
It won't go to the last screen. Okay.
It doesn't want to go to that last screen, does it, Miles?
No, it doesn't want to go to the very last line, which has the link to you kindly provided a personal page for each of your presenters. It's not the end of the world. That's
not to worry. I will. If you click through one more page, one more slide, Miles. Just while we're doing this, guys,
No.
would you like to please let me know what questions you have? We've got about 5 minutes of questions we'll have, if that's okay. I know some of you have to shoot off, but not to worry. But what I will do is ask a few questions. Okay. Miles, are you able to share some of the cutting edge technology, some of the names and resources for that you mentioned?
Well, I hate doing this because I'm really very clear that this is a pitch-free environment. But we have created an e-coaching system, which literally has no coach. And that may sound counterintuitive. It's actually incredibly powerful, and we're in a testing phase with a number of large corporates at the moment. Here's its relevance to coaches. Our first client was a large Swiss bank, and they had trained their people in Six Sigma technologies. They could, to run projects, and they found that those people did a better job if they gave them a coach. However, their coaches, who numbered 12, could only reach 10 people, and they were putting 400 people through the training a year. So what the eCoach enabled them to do was we designed one specifically for this situation, and the e-coaching system took up 3/4 of the coaching. So you'd have 3 sessions kind of as the coachee, the player, using the system, and then the real live breathing coach would take up the fourth session. And what that meant was that each coach could now reach 50 people. So for instance, I'm presenting that there's a real thing there, but actually it's just a new way of thinking about coaching. As a professional coach, if you could reach 50 people, you could reach much more than that if it was your full-time job. So you could perhaps quadruple the number of people you're reaching and significantly drop the price. That's got to be a proposition. Another thing I mentioned was a thing called Coach Track, which is a way of a coach managing. And then there are a number of systems like that, out there in the world, where you manage the relationship, the notes, the information, the library of stuff you want to give somebody. What's different about the Coach Track is that it's actually set up to do a particular kind of coaching, which is it's not in-depth coaching, it's more transactional coaching. It's more about keeping you focused week to week and day to day so that you achieve results. So it's absolutely appropriate for people who are on projects. Those are the two things that come to mind right now, Ben.
Thank you very much for that. Another question. What is the core approach when coaching for performance?
It's a good question. We've launched a project in London called the Enabling Genius Research Project. So Enabling Genius is just that. A genius is a term, you could substitute the word in excellence there, except the challenge there is to suggest to people that the notion of genius in our society says that genius is the preserve of the few. And there's a lot of evidence that says that actually that genius is not something that's kind of God-given or handed down in the genes, that it's actually something that somebody developed painstakingly over time. So the performance approach is one, having a real work output attached to the coaching. So in other words, I'm less likely to coach somebody on being a better leader. I will coach somebody on being a better leader to turn around their organization or to deliver an extraordinary project. So the first of it is actually qualifying the people you're coaching with. So I'm working with a large UK ethical drinks company that's just been bought by one of the largest drinks companies in the world, and they've got to grow the business into the footprint of the bigger company, and I'm working with the chief executive as he does that. That's an extraordinary performance challenge. I'm working with somebody in the UK in our national health service, the NHS, and he's responsible for putting out for the autumn it's called Connecting for Health. How the surgeries and hospitals link information and allow people to book. It's an extraordinary project. So the first thing is there's got to be some real challenging endpoint. There's got to be some work to be done, and then it's less about setting goals and it's more about having that person work out what it is they've got, what it is they're great at that will help them achieve those ends. So genius seems to be about understanding what your unique genius is and delivering on that. And then it's another part of it seems to be about actually understanding that there's a mindset. Tim Galway was the first to identify that mindset. He called it self-2 as opposed to self-1. But you get to Carol Dweck, who talks about fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. So there's a mindset that you bring to a task, and you can help people identify that in themselves and spend more time working in that mindset. So those will be some of the things some of the places I go to.
Thank you for that, Miles. Excuse me. Okay, one last question. Do leaders ultimately need to anticipate shifts?
A former friend of mine who does extraordinary work in in Africa, a guy called Trevor Waldock. He's bringing kind of coaching, and that's a coaching methodology into working with people in places like Uganda and Rwanda. And he's working with the leaders and elders in all those communities. And he talks about leadership as lifting up your head. So meaning bringing your eyes away from what's immediately in front of you and looking out at the horizon and what's coming. And I think that we know an awful lot about management and how to control. And I think we've frequently sold out on leadership in favor of management. So yes, absolutely, leaders need to be in a place where they're thinking about what's around the corner. It's fundamental.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Miles, and thank you for a great presentation. We've had some super feedback of the session put into the chat box. Can I encourage everyone to jump on and publicly acknowledge the session if you feel so fit to? You can do that at facebook.com//WBECS. That's facebook.com/WBECS, so WBECS. If you just jump on there, give your feedback. If you enjoyed the session, we would love to hear from you. And what I'm going to do is say thank you to Miles, and I am going to call this session to an end. Thank you once again, Miles. Really, really appreciate it. Great session.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you all for listening. I'm deeply proud that you did that. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.